excited homeschool moms and dads. It was a great time for us to be together and be encouraged. Many of us have walked difficult roads through the coronavirus pandemic. Others have been at home recharging with their families, and others have been affected financially and in other ways. We want you to know that as a team here at Homeworks and BJU Press Homeschool, that we continue to pray for you and love you, even though the time of the party is past. And that has led what has led Eugenia and team to decide to have these after parties. So let me know you're here in the comments. Let me know where you're from. And in the meantime, I want to take a minute to introduce a good friend of mine, Connie Albers. You are going to be so blessed and encouraged by hearing her speak this morning. Connie and her husband Tom have been married for 38 years. Connie's been involved in the homeschooling community for 30 years. She's a podcaster, she's an author, she's a veteran homeschool mom. She homeschooled her 5 kids from kindergarten through high school. They all graduated from college and have jobs, which is always a great place to be, although the pandemic may have affected that a little bit. But Connie has so much to share. I'm going to bring her on the screen for a few minutes, and we're going to talk, and then I'm going to leave you with her for her to encourage you. Good morning, Connie.
Good morning. I'm so happy to be with you today.
Well, you were a faithful party member
Woohoo!
This week. I know you saw lots of footage and saw lots of people being encouraged and all.
Oh, I know. I second what you said. If you are just coming on and you were at the party last week, I want you to do a thumbs up or some kind of emoji, raise your hand. We want to know if you were there. It delighted me. I was exhausted, I will say. I was exhausted, and I didn't even have to do the work that you and Eugenia and you, Sharon, and everybody had to do. And I was like, at the end of that day, I was charged up, and I thought, wow, my brain is just so full of information. So it was wonderful.
And moms, you can go back, and dads, we had lots of dads last week too that are doing the homeschooling. You can go back and read through the threads and watch the live broadcast and be encouraged if you need them. And there's an awful lot of information you can gather too, just about BJU Press curriculum. So take advantage of that if you haven't done that. If there's something you missed, it's still there. You can go back and see it. Well, Connie, I want to thank you for everything you've done for homeschooling moms. I know it is your desire to equip moms with confidence and joy. Tell us the name of your book real quick before I turn the platform over to you.
Sure. It's Parenting Beyond the Rules, Raising Teens with Confidence and Joy.
So I think what you're going to hear from Connie today and what you would get from her podcast, Equipped to Be, is just the notion that grace reigns supreme. There are no rules or formula that you have to follow with your children. So without any further ado here, I'm going to say goodbye to Connie and just thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Zan. I am happy to be here. And, I don't know about you guys, but I was making notes last week. And if I showed you my little book, I have pages and pages of tips and suggestions and help. And I loved Mike's talk, his devotion last week, and it was about fear. And then Heidi and Zan's wonderful devotion, as well as Nancy and Faith. So I want you to tell me, did you hear all of the speakers? Were you able to be there for the whole 5 days? I don't want you necessarily have to write what your nuggets that you took away from, but if you're like me, you took away a lot of really rich truths that you can take action on that very minute, that very day. So this morning, as I was wrestling with, what do I share? What would be a hope-filled message for today, right now, this very minute? And I had to start thinking about where we are, where we have been, and the journey of the past 7 weeks. And I kept thinking about God. Oh, thank you guys so much. I'm glad you learned so much. I had to keep thinking about what was God whispering in my ear? What was he wanting me to share with you? And the most important thing is not that I'm a writer or that I speak or that I have a podcast, but that I'm a mom. I'm a mom. Yeah, I'm a mom just like you. I have 5 kids, 5 children in 7 years. Probably the difference is mine grew up and they're now all adults. As Zan said, they've gone on through college, they're graduating. which is a wonderful thing, and 3 are married. So my perspective is a bit different. My story is a bit different, but we are all walking through a crisis together, right? Well, it was about 7 weeks ago. Here I am. I live in Orlando, Florida, and I am running around Animal Kingdom at Walt Disney World. I had just ridden the Pandora ride that it's taken me like 2 years to finally get on because I didn't want to wait in a line for 2 hours. Life was good. We were having fun. And then our text messages started to pop up on our screen. Graduations were canceled. The University of Central Florida had canceled classes and they were all going online. By the time we left Animal Kingdom, schools were shut, universities were closing, graduations were canceling. And in a matter of a week, life flipped upside down for most Americans. It did for me. And it's done that for our whole country. And as somebody that's been involved in public relations, it's my job to read and kind of know what's going on around the country. And I watched how we moved through a season of confusion, not certain what was happening, and then fear and panic. We were shuffling to gather up our supplies, and we've all seen the memes about toilet paper. I mean, oh my goodness, there's been some pretty funny ones. But as we've hit confusion, there were some days I didn't even know what day it was. Confusion is kind of like having a middle school child. You put them to bed happy and they wake up and they're not the same child. And you're like, please go back and find that child that I put to bed that night. But we would be glued to our televisions trying to wait for that breaking news. What was going to happen next? Then we watched and we waited. And as we watched and waited, we tried to assure and reassure our children and even steady our own mind as to what was coming and what we were facing. Then we've moved to shaming. Y'all probably seen some of that. The shaming of, what do we do? What's next? Do we go home or do you stay home? But you can go home as long as you stay home. But if you have to go out, you can go out. But if you go out, you can only go to the grocery store, but we would rather you stay home. There was just such a state of uncertainty. And that's where we are today. And as I think about where I was at the beginning of this, laughing, enjoying Walt Disney World and watching, I live in Florida, the entire economy of Central Florida just dissipate. I mean, we're a tourist-driven city. And I've just been watching all of this unfold. And some things kind of struck me. One, we hear the propaganda piece that we are all in this together. We're home, we're together at home, alone together. Are we really in the same storm? That's the question I keep coming back to. And my answer is no. We're in the same crisis, but we're not in the same storm. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you live in New York City, you're in the eye of it, right? But if you're in South Dakota, it might not be so bad. And because I live in Florida, we often have to deal with hurricanes. And you know those models that we've been watching, all of us have been watching them, and those models for a hurricane are very much like the models we've been watching for this current crisis. They're all over the place. One day the model will have it totally going off the coast of Florida. And then another day the model will have it coming straight up the middle of Florida. It's going to just decimate the entire state. And there's not really a confusion, there's not really a certainty or a clarity as to what that storm's going to do, when it's going to hit, and how and what the impact will be like. That's like this coronavirus. We don't know exactly where it's going to hit, when it's going to hit, or how bad it's going to hit. So are we in the same storm? We're in the same crisis, but we're not in the same storm. And several things just kind of kept coming up to me. What is next? Well, we can't plan and we can't control it. Yes, we've been learning vocabulary words that most of us didn't know, like mitigation. We are all familiar with terms and medical terms that we did not know, wasn't part of our normal vocabulary, right? But they are now, and we know them very well. And that fear is kind of still underlying. And we've heard Mike speak last week about fear, not being governed by fear. We know God has not given us the spirit of fear, but it's there. Worry, anxiety, stress, they're all kind of like right there under the surface. And so while we are facing the same virus, we're not facing the same storm, but we still serve the same God. And as you are thinking about where you are and how you are handling that storm, I want to focus on John 16:33, and I'm going to read this to you. And it says, I have told you these things, and I love this, so that in me you may have peace. If you have your Bibles, or if you have Post-it notes, I'm a big Post-it note fanatic, or you have your phone, I just want you to write that down. In me you have peace. That's a promise. Then God goes on to say, in this world, you will have trouble. Okay? You will. That's a promise. So while you may not be facing the exact same storm that I am, you will have storms, and they will be a little different. But take heart. See, there's the hope. Take heart, because God has overcome them. He has overcome the world. So my panic can't be your panic. And my crisis isn't your crisis, and yours isn't mine. So what do we do with that? Well, God tells us we need to remain steadfast. God is still the same God. He is still faithful, and he always will be. I was listening to a young mama. She has 3 little children. Her oldest is 6 years old. And when I think about remaining steadfast, some of you, or as Zan had said, are experiencing more of a crisis than others. Maybe you were laid off, or your husband was laid off, and you're not sure. Maybe your business was deemed non-essential. For some of you, the biggest struggle you're having is Hobby Lobby closed. And I'm not minimizing that. I'm acknowledging that we're all in a different place, but in the same storm. And I was listening to this mama. Her daughter was 6. Normally she was really compliant, but for some reason she really started acting out or acting up. And we asked, and I just kind of asked her some questions, and she wanted to go into that, you know how we all do as mamas. I mean, it's kind of like universal. We want to help our children, and every moment is a teaching moment. Or is it? Not in this moment. In this moment, this mama had the wisdom to sit down, pull up her little daughter, swoop her in her arms, lay her head on her heart, and just tickle her back. You know, that just gentle stroking that you do. Just laid her head on her shoulder and just said, it's going to be okay. What's going on? And her 6-year-old just burst into tears, just crying, because she didn't understand why Grandma and Grandpa couldn't come over to play anymore. She didn't understand why she can't go to Grandma and Grandpa's for sleepovers like they always do. And she hasn't been able to play with her cousins. She also hasn't been able to go to church and be with her church friends. Her mom and dad's life really wasn't disrupted. They're both still working. One's in the medical field and one's in law enforcement. But see, that little girl's world, her storm is very different from mom and dad's storm. And your storm is different from mine. But as this mom held her daughter and just tickled her back ever so slightly and just loving her and saying, it's okay, she was acknowledging that her child was grieving what was lost. Instead of saying, it's not that big a deal, it's going to pass, trust God, you know he's in this. Yes, we know God is faithful. Yes, we know God has got this under control. But you and I, mamas, we need to be tender and tuned in and intentional about walking our children through their storm, because it's very different for them than it is for you. A 6-year-old is very different than a 12-year-old or a 16-year-old. And as I was telling you, I was at Walt Disney walking around. The friend that I was with was set to graduate college. And there was such a big deal. It was the first graduation, college graduation, on her mom's side. It was a big deal. And that wasn't going to happen. And there was disappointment and hurt and frustration. Is it materialistic or superficial? No, it's very, very real to her. And I just walked and listened and let her talk about how disappointing it is. The hurt is real and legitimate. It's where do we stay with that? We have to stand on God's truth. So we must remain steadfast, knowing that God is with us and he is faithful, but we must stand on truth. God is always faithful and he always will be. God is there to help us, and he will make it. He will lead you through every difficult circumstance. The unemployment, the recovery, the loss of a job, the attitude, the angry outbursts of a child, maybe yourself, The stress, I'm gonna tell you a true story. I've had so much stress. Heidi St. John and I were talking this weekend, and I was telling her that there's been so much stress on me and my heart that when I told my husband one day, y'all will laugh, but I told my husband one day, I said, if you come in my office and I'm on the floor and the paramedics show up, just tell them what's going on. She's just had a stress attack and she's on the floor. I'm like, we have to acknowledge the reality that storms are hard and they're challenging. And that while my storm is different from yours is either coming or you're going into one or you're coming out of one. But we do know this, life is going to be very different. It's going to be different for all of us where we are. Because everybody's going, what's next? And all the shamings now happen. If you're opening too soon or not soon enough. But we always know that God will calm the storm. He just might not do it in your time frame or mine. When we cope with a crisis, these are 3 things I want you to remember. The crisis can overwhelm your capabilities. They can test your limit and test your resolve. But if you determine that the crisis, and we have to realize the crises are not going to be convenient. I mean, who wanted this to happen right now? No one. And the crisis, they can overwhelm and control you. But, and this is the part I love, but if you decide in advance how you're going to cope with whatever comes your way, you're going to navigate the storm with more peace because you're putting your trust in the Lord. If you set your mindset ahead of time, how you're going to react and not overreact, you'll have more peace of mind. And your attitude, if you decide how you're going to maintain your attitude, you'll find that you will ensure a greater sense of confidence and joy. So seize this moment. Seize this moment with your family. Seize this moment with your children. You're creating defining moments. Make them happen. Pay attention. Talk about them. They matter. They're going to be the stories that your children will share one day when they say, how did Grandma and Grandpa handle this historic moment in time? Or you're going to tell your grandkids one time what you did, how you were trusting, how God was faithful. How is He writing the story for you? Teach them that it's okay to talk about those feelings. We just can't stay there, but we do want to walk through them. Use this time to build closer relationships. It's an amazing opportunity. Some of you are going stir crazy, but some of you, this is a dream come true. You don't have to say no to anything. You don't have to say, oh, we can't make it. You can just say, nope, sorry, got to stay inside. We don't have to do that. And I encourage you to put the lens of somebody else on. Have empathy and compassion. It's amazing that our God knows where we are at every moment and guides and leads us through our struggle at this moment, at this time. And pray for wisdom and discernment. These are uncharted, uncertain times. Ask the Lord for wisdom and He gives it abundantly. Ask for discernment, how you should react and respond to your child, or maybe your husband. Maybe he's stressed and he's concerned about his job. And maybe about some of those homeschool moms, because we know homeschooling is just, homeschoolers are running, parents are running to homeschooling, and I love it. Because we are learning that we have the most amazing opportunity to shape, form, mold, and fashion our children for the future and for the glory of God. And when we stop and we realize we're creating defining moments, when we think about that little girl, your daughter, your son, or that teenager that's just frustrated because you are being the parent and you're not letting them go hang out with all of their friends because you're trying to teach them to be a responsible citizen, then it matters. See, you can walk through this season and you can teach your children how to walk through the season with confidence and joy. And there will be stories that come from this. Whether some of you, because I'm closing this out, but I really want to know, like, how many of you bought all the chickens? How many of you started a garden and you started homesteading? See, with disruption always come innovation. Paint pictures of possibilities for your kids. They might create and solve, they might solve a problem that's been created that we didn't actually know even existed. Show them how it is possible. Show them how to search and how to be problem solvers. And then pray and ask God to lead. And He is faithful every step of the day. And when you start to get unsure-footed and you start to worry or wonder, remember that this trouble, God already knows about it, and He's there. And when you start to falter, hold your hand out to Him. Lean into Him. And when you can't get up and you can't go anymore because the stress and the pressure of it all, maybe it's the financial shortfalls, maybe it's you're scared about homeschooling next year because you're afraid you might ruin your child. I was there. Mine are all out of therapy now, so they're fine. I'm just kidding. They often laugh about that. But I want you to picture your family in a year, in 5 years. I want you to think about the stories you're telling. And I want you to do as I do. I want you to create a journal. Just write them down. Write your feelings down. If you're an artist, draw. But capture this moment in time, because it will be stories. We will no longer have to talk about how we walked uphill both ways in snow to get to school. That story is like nothing compared to what we're telling now. Tell a good story. Tell a story of how God is faithful in your day and every moment. And when you falter, He will pick you up and He will carry you until you can stand on your own. But be faithful, Mom and Dad. It's going to be an amazing ride. And when you look back and you see how God helped you sail through the storm, your confidence will swell and your trust in the Lord will deepen. So with that, I'm going to say, hey, Zan, come back. I'm so glad these were encouraging words for you. And, you know, I would love to know, hey, Zan.
Encouraging. Oh, let's see. Let me turn my microphone on.
I was trying to lip read.
I didn't want any noise here if my dog started barking to mess with your devotion. But it was so encouraging to hear what you had to say to us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
and I love the idea that desperation often leads to innovation. And,
disruption.
Yes, disruption. I think the word desperation was my word because I've talked to so many moms who are just desperate. And so I love that God can work all things together for good.
I mean, look at all these small businesses, Zan. I mean, we have mamas that had sewing machines and now they've created a business making masks. And
yeah,
it's just amazing. Some of the innovations that are happening right before our eyes, things that you and I never dreamed would happen. And some people say, oh, I just fell into it. No, God has equipped you with gifts, strengths, and talents, and He has prepared an opportunity for you right here, right now, to make an impact in those around you and in your family.
And we need to be good storytellers, and we need to always tell of God's faithfulness. So thank you, Connie, so much for being with us today.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Devotion for many, many days and weeks to come. So God bless y'all, and we'll see you later.